Think about what anxiety is. Think about what it means. What do any emotions mean? What do they mean? Because all emotions, whether they feel good or not, are giving you feedback about your relationship with who you are. So the better they feel, the more you are allowing who you are to be present. And the worse you feel, the more you're pinching it off. So if you feel anxiety, it means in that moment of anxiety, you are focusing a thought into being that your inner being is not anywhere near. And as you introduce that thought into your vibrational mix, you cause resistance, which doesn't allow the fullness of who you are to be realized by you. But here's the thing. Doesn't matter if you've done it since you were 5 years old. Doesn't matter how many years you've renewed that and carried it forward. It always means the same thing. And as you acknowledge what it does mean, as you acknowledge that what it means is that you are not a full vibrational mix with who you really are, that you're introducing resistance, then the idea of introducing less resistance must become a practical idea to you. So if offering less resistance is a practical idea to you, then let's talk about how the easiest way to do that is. So it started when you were 5, let's say, and you've been carrying that thought forward and carrying that thought forward. And so there's some momentum about it. It's a little harder to stop. But here's the thing. When a negative thought comes to you in any moment in time, it doesn't really have the momentum of all those years. It just has the practice in this moment. In other words, what's your propensity is really the only thing that your emotions are really asking you to pay attention to. Have you heard us talk about the emotional scale, where on one end of the scale is love and appreciation and ecstasy and all of those fantastic feelings of invincibility, and on the other end is fear and grief and powerlessness, and in the middle of that scale is contentment or satisfaction. So let's say you start out in a day and you wake up, and because you haven't been thinking much yet today, there's not much momentum going. You haven't pushed any buttons that have taken you into those stressful, paranoid feelings. And so in your attitude more of the contentment that you've awakened in, hear this, you have more control. When you feel contentment or satisfaction, you have control. You can step right out in front of that thought and stop it. But if you let it get very far down the road, then you can't get out in front of it and stop it. And so if you can realize that you're feeling some dissatisfaction, you can change the subject to satisfaction rather easily if you catch it fast. If you don't put words to it, once you start talking about it, you're done. Once you talk to somebody else about it, the momentum is such that you may not get it back in this whole day. But if you can catch it early enough, you can maintain, and these are the operative words that we want you to hear, you can maintain control of your vibration. Anxiety means a lot of momentum because I've got a lot of thoughts going about a lot of things that could go wrong. And a very practical, well-grounded earthling would say, well, of course I'm anxious. I'm paying attention to what's going on in the world. And we say, you can get so good at staying tuned into your source energy that you can pay attention to what's going on in the world from your connection to source energy, and you won't feel anxiety. You'll feel empowered for more. You've got to be in the receiving mode of what you're asking for. And when you feel anxiety, you are not in the receiving mode. Well, you see, if you hadn't asked, no anxiety could happen. Because if you're not asking for something, then you can't deny it. But if you have the capacity to ask for it, then you've got to use your mind control to stay in alignment with what you've asked for. You can't be sloppy in your thoughts. You can't ask for one thing and focus in opposition to it without your guidance system saying, excuse me, you might want to know this. Now you've asked and we're all over it. And law of attraction says that which is likened to itself is drawn. So we want to call your attention to the non-physical part of you. When life causes you to ask for something, your inner being immediately becomes that more that you have asked for. And the law of attraction responds to that non-physical you point of attraction. the energy that creates worlds, swirls, the cooperative components, everything that is necessary in order to accomplish what you have asked for begins to come into play. There is a powerful attraction that is reaching for all cooperative components. And you have not heard us say this before. And most of all, reaching for the component that is you, since you gave birth to it. You follow? So here is law of attraction and source energy and all cooperative components gathering everything necessary for what you've asked for. And if you are a holdout, then you feel anxiety. Anxiety, and worse, is what you feel when you've asked and set a whole lot into motion, and then you stubbornly decide that you're just going to keep looking at what is instead of going with what you are in the process of creating. When you are a creator, you have a responsibility to your creation if you want to feel good. And the responsibility to your creation, if you want to feel good, is to feel good. But somehow, along your physical trail, somebody convinced you, and you bought into it pretty early, that you're supposed to suffer and that anything that is worth having takes some sacrifice and some struggle. And so you convinced yourself that the anxiety that feels so awful must be a good thing. It must be part of the struggle that others have told you is necessary to accomplish anything. And we say, use your own resources to test that theory to discover how bogus it is. If you can identify within yourself what an actual feeling of satisfaction is, just by noticing life, and when you catch yourself being satisfied, stop for a moment and acknowledge the components of it. And most of all, notice how it feels and try to milk it to make it last longer. What happens is, then you not only identify it, but you begin to isolate it. You begin to own the vibration of it, which makes you have a stronger propensity to go there more easily next time. And we want to say to you that satisfaction and being in the receiving mode are one and the same. A feeling of satisfaction and being under the influence of your own inner being are one and the same. And so Esther takes that to mean that when she's satisfied, she's tuned in, tapped in, turned on. And that satisfaction, because she knows about momentum, can only become more and more. And we want you to hear from us that when you are satisfied, which means you are absent of resistance, then the momentum picks up speed really fast. So it's much easier than you are previously believing to take yourself to those higher levels of greater and greater and greater ecstasy and momentum. So Esther sat for an afternoon and just thought about things that she knew she felt satisfaction about. And it wasn't about possessing things, maybe a little. She used to say to Jerry, why don't you buy me that car? It would make me happy for the afternoon. But satisfaction, we mean those feelings of true resonance with your inner being. We mean being in vibrational harmony with the whole of you. We mean the whole of you present in the moment. And when the whole of you is present in any moment, then your ability to extract from the details of your moment the things that are God-worthy, the things that are source, the things that feel wonderful, things like love and appreciation, satisfaction on steroids, become your experience. Satisfaction is so easy to identify. It's easy to notice. It's easy if you care about it. It's easy to isolate. It's easy to practice. It's easy to own. And then it's easy to notice when you're deviating and when you're on point. You see what we're getting at? So then you might say, I sort of have a vague recollection of being anxious, but now my strongest recollection, because it's something that is happening the most often to me now, is a feeling of satisfaction, because that's where I focus and that's what I find. And most important is because that's where my inner being is, and I only have to hook up just for a few seconds. I only have to hold myself in satisfaction for a few seconds before the momentum of my connection with all that is and source energy and my inner being becomes my dominant point of attraction. And then I'm off and rolling, you see. And we get it. You came to us to chew on something, to get some clarity. And if you don't know what you don't want, then you can't know what you do want. And so it's a perfectly logical conversation to have, to point out where you are that you don't want to be in order to get clarity about where you do want to be. But you gotta just sort of dig in and decide that you are going to take control of the direction of your thoughts. Esther said to herself the other day, and she doesn't have it down yet, but she really meant it when she said it, I can find satisfaction and I can maintain satisfaction, and I also occasionally find dissatisfaction because life comes at you pretty fast sometimes. And so when dissatisfaction comes, because you can't control the whole world, it's not your job, and because you're eager about noticing things, or at least Esther is, and so when she sees something that is dissatisfying, she said to herself, at least I'm not going to talk about it. I can notice it, and I can take the emotional hit on it, but I don't have to talk about it. And sometimes she does, and sometimes she doesn't. And it depends on how big that pushed her button. Because law of attraction says that which is likened to itself is drawn. So when you see something that you don't want, and you have had thoughts about not wanting it before, those thoughts are relatively easy to activate within you. But when you come to realize that the way you feel in any moment in time is really not about what's happening out there. It's only about what's happening in here. It's only about the mix of vibrations that you've got going on. And we want to say again, in fact, we want to say it again and again and again and again, if you weren't really different than that, that would cause you no discomfort at all. If you were not pure love, you would not take any vibrational issue with something that is hate. Your guidance system is so perfect, all the time perfect, you see. So just play with it. Be easy about it. Most of all, what we'd like to say to you, others too, don't beat up on yourself. And we'd like to say this to you too. It's not necessary that you make a proclamation to yourself or to the world, moment by moment, about how you feel about stuff. You don't have to explain nothing to nobody. But there is this feeling within most of our human friends that goes something like this. Here I stand, and I'm a little insecure about how I fit into all of this. So if I explain myself to others and they get me, then I'll feel better. But it never works that way. Have you noticed? It doesn't matter how many humans get you in your negative approach to life. You're still defying your inner being who really gets you. The whole world could agree with you that something is a bad thing and that your stress is therefore justified. But if you're out of whack with your inner being, you're still going to feel awful. You cannot gather enough others to agree with you about how bad something is to ever feel good about how bad it is. It's never going to work that way. So you have a choice of feeling good or asking others to get you. And if we were standing in your physical shoes, we'd give that up, because no matter how hard you try, they're not going to get you. They're not going to get you. You're not gettable. They're not supposed to get you. They're not supposed to use you as their barometer of their guidance, although that's what humans do all the time to each other. You think if you can get enough people to get you, then your insecurity will go away. The more you look for other people to get you, they're so fickle. They get you in 1 minute and they don't get you in the next, and then you try to be all these different things so that you're gettable all the time. And you know you do that to each other, because if someone is tuned in, tapped in, turned on, they're under the influence of source energy, and they're holding you as their object of attention. Oh, that feels so good to you, because all that delicious well-being and pure positive energy and love and appreciation is washing over you. And if you're meeting it just a little bit, it feels so good. But if you look to that person for that, and that person is sort of unstable in that connection, they're going to let you down right away. That's looking for love in all the wrong places, you see. If there's anything we would like you to leave this gathering decided about, it's not to care whether other humans get you or not, because sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But if you care about them getting you and sometimes they do, then when they don't, that'll really get you. But if you're looking to your inner being, who is always there for you, your inner being will never let you down. When you reach for thoughts of satisfaction, you will always find them, because your inner being is always there, you see. Takes a little reorientation, but it's not hard, you'll see.